My name's Samantha. I've travelled here from South Africa, so halfway around the world. I'm 51 years old and I'm here for treatment of stage 4 breast cancer. I chose to come all the way to Thailand because, having considered a number of clinics, it's the one area that offers particular cancer targeting treatments, such as the NK cell treatment and the IPT, which IPT is offered in Europe as well, but not in combination with all of the other treatments here. So they were the big draw cards for me, and then added to that all the immune boosting treatments, the vitamin C IVs, artesunate, the B17. It's been quite a complicated journey of up and down. I was first diagnosed in 2015 with breast cancer. It was around about stage 3 then. It had already progressed to my lymph. As everybody is on a first diagnosis, it's a complete shock. You never think it's going to happen to you. I'm a single mum. My little girl was 9 years at the time. And there was enormous pressure to be raced straight into surgery, which I did. Within less than a week, I'd had a mastectomy and all of the lymphs on the one side removed. In hindsight, and with the knowledge that I have now and the research that I've done, I wouldn't have made that decision now. However, following that, I was put in touch with a number of different people and explored alternative healing paths, and although there was an enormous amount of pressure to go straight into chemotherapy, I opted not to, which was quite controversial. It caused me a lot of conflict because you're desperate to stay alive, you want to do the right thing, and either way there's a lot of risk involved. I also had to consider I had a pre-existing condition. I've got a spinal cord injury from an accident in 2008, and it's a miracle that I'm still walking around and living independently following that accident. I was paralysed for some time. And it has compromised my whole system, so I didn't feel that I was strong enough to withstand full-on chemotherapy. A year after the first diagnosis, I had a recurrence with a very small lump that was growing in the scar tissue of the surgery, and it was cancerous. And when that happens, you are flawed, you feel that everything you're doing isn't working. And it was very difficult to put it in perspective of it's just a small lump, you know, not to freak out. So I had that small lump cut out, and then I attempted to start with the conventional chemotherapy. I survived 2 cycles. The second one, the side effects were even worse than the first, and even a week or 2 after treatment, I was still extremely shaky on my feet. I couldn't really look after myself. I definitely couldn't look after my daughter. I could barely get to the kitchen to feed the cats. I could barely even get to the bathroom, and I'd lost control of, you know, vital things like bladder and bowels. It was very frightening, and, you know, my concerns were for permanent damage in the future. And I think I was so traumatized by those 2 cycles that I just didn't go back to complete the chemotherapy. And by that stage I'd been researching, you know, what alternatives there were, and I knew the only way to find other treatment was to go outside of South Africa. And in the 4 years since I was first diagnosed, I was aware that there were clinics dotted around the world that offer alternative treatments and often combine them with conventional medicine with different forms of chemotherapy. So I started narrowing down the options, and then essentially weighing up between Thailand, which was very difficult for me to travel to, and Europe. And really the deciding factor for me on Thailand was the NK cell treatment, because they remove your natural killer cells, and it's time sensitive. They have to get to Japan, where they select them and multiply them, and then they're returned to you and put back into your system 2 weeks later. And this just isn't possible from Europe. So although I knew it was going to be a much more difficult journey for me physically and emotionally to come to Thailand, I felt that it was the best possible choice. I think it's really important to have someone with you. I'm relatively well compared with some of the patients that I've met here. Some are very dependent on their carer or their partner. But emotionally, it's hard going. Most people are here for around about a 6-week stint. I've nearly finished my 6th week, which is my final week. And it is challenging. It's emotionally and physically challenging every day. There's a lot of treatments happening to your body. And although the side effects are nowhere near as debilitating as conventional treatment, it's tiring, it's exhausting, and emotionally, you're up and down from day to day. And it's just really helpful to have somebody there to share your fears with and your hopes with. And also, you forget things easily because you're going through a lot. I think that the treatment that people are most anxious about is the IPT, the immune potentiated chemotherapy. And it actually is probably it transpires to be one of the more preferred treatments. It's quite interesting. You have nil by mouth on the morning of treatment, and the treatment's once a week. And we have to wait until your blood sugar's at a certain level, and then they inject insulin. Your blood sugar drops very low, where you feel very, very dozy and a little bit out of it, but you're monitored all the time. And then after a specific period, the chemotherapy drugs are infused into your central line. So there's no pain involved and there's no sickness involved. The best bit about it afterwards is gorging yourself on a wonderful plate of fruit and watermelon juice, and the whole feeling of being brought back up again. So it's all over in a very quick period of time, and really the only noticeable side effect from it is extreme tiredness. The first couple of times it didn't really affect me. By the 3rd time I was sleeping in the afternoon and then waking for a short while in the evening and sleeping again. So it's really just sleeping it off, which is nothing compared with the nausea, the vomiting and the nerve damage control with conventional chemotherapy that I experienced. The MRI that I had 3 weeks ago did reveal that there's a shrinkage of the tumour, so that had shrunk by about 1 centimetre in diameter, which was a good reflection to know that I'm responding well to treatment and that there is progress. Clearly I want to see it gone, but everybody here that I've met has progressed in terms of their health and in terms of their treatment and has returned home better than they arrived here. So yeah, I'm hoping for further progress too. When you're newly diagnosed, you still believe that conventional medicine has all the answers, and it's very difficult not to be pushed into the conventional path straight away, and you really need to take time because an enormous amount of damage can be done by chemotherapy. Conventional chemotherapy, some people don't even survive it. Some people don't even survive the first one, and that's not being dramatic. There's somebody that I knew back home weeks before I left who had a breast cancer, but she was fine, and she was a mum of 2, and she had her first chemotherapy and died of a heart attack in the night. So it's not to scaremonger. I also know people that have sailed through it and sailed through the radiation, and they're still living well. And that was why it was so hard for me to decide, whether you suck it up and be brave and endure those treatments and live well, or whether that's not for you, and it's such an individual choice. The nurses are brilliant. They are extremely on the ball and they're very attentive. Everybody, I think it's Thailand in general, everybody's extremely polite and courteous and helpful. The customer relations team on the front desk are amazing. You arrive every morning, you're greeted with a smile, they see you out to the bus in the evening, you're shuttled between your accommodation and here, so it's all very efficient, it's managed very well. The team of 3 doctors do the rounds every morning, so you can ask your questions every morning and they'll explain to you, they'll go through your treatments for the day. They do give you the program for the week, but I found most people tend to live by the day. It's a lot to take in. I feel a sense of relief. It is a relief to complete this. It's hard going, but not as hard going as conventional treatment. And I think it is good to be removed from your home environment. You're removed from a lot of pressures. You're living in this sort of protective bubble whilst you're here. So I'm feeling positive, and I'll go home and I know that I'll fully embrace the healthy eating and the juicing and everything that I was doing before I came out here. And yeah, then looking forward to having my follow-up scan and seeing what that reveals.